No. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Stutzman? No. Mr. Stutzman? No. Mr. Moore of Utah? Mr. Moore of Utah? No. Mr. Estes? No. Mr. Estes? No. Mr. Burkeen? No. Mr. Burkeen? No. Mr. Obernolte? No. Mr. Obernolte? No. Mr. Carey? Mr. Carey? No. Mr. Edwards? No. Mr. Edwards? No. Mr. Clyde? No. Mr. Clyde? No. Ms. Houchin? Ms. Houchin? No. Mr. McDowell? No. Mr. McDowell? No. Mr. Gill? No. Mr. Gill? No. Mr. Moore of North Carolina? No. Mr. Moore of North Carolina? No. Mr. Boyle?
Aye.
Mr. Boyle? Aye. Mr. Doggett?
Aye.
Mr. Doggett? Aye. Mr. Scott?
Aye.
Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Peters? Aye. Mr. Peters? Aye. Mr. Panetta?
Yes.
Mr. Panetta? Aye. Ms. Watson-Coleman?
Yes.
Ms. Watson-Coleman? Aye. Ms. Plaskett?
Yes.
Ms. Plaskett? Aye. Ms. Escobar?
Aye.
Ms. Escobar? Aye. Ms. Omar?
Aye.
Ms. Omar? Aye. Ms. Ballant?
Yes.
Ms. Ballant? Aye. Ms. Capter?
Aye.
Ms. Capter? Aye. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal? Aye. Ms. Chu?
Aye.
Ms. Chu? Aye. Mr. Tonko?
Aye.
Mr. Tonko? Aye. Mr. McGarvey?
Yes.
Mr. McGarvey? Aye. Mr. Ramo?
Aye.
Mr. Ramo? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman? No.
Any member wish to change their vote or vote who haven't voted? If not, the clerk shall report.
Mr. Chair, on the vote, there were 16 ayes and 21 noes.
The noes have it, the motion's not agreed to. The committee will now vote on the motion offered by Representative Jayapal. And if you would again restate what that motion to direct is as you redesignate the motion.
Motion number 4, offered by Representative Jayapal. Ms. Jayapal moves that the Committee on the Budget direct its chairman to request on behalf of the committee that the rule for consideration of the bill include a point of order prohibiting the use of a current policy baseline to estimate the effects of a future amendment between the Houses or conference report on the bill.
This is the one you found very compelling, Mr. Chairman.
It was compelling, I must admit.
So there's another chance for you to vote yes on it.
Even after I've slept a couple nights, it was compelling. But
A great show of bipartisanship,
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Mr. Norman? No. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock? No. Mr. Grothman? Mr. Grothman? No. Mr. Smucker? Mr. Smucker? No. Mr. Carter? No. Mr. Carter? No. Mr. Klein? No. Mr. Klein? No. Mr. Bergman? No. Mr. Bergman? No. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Stutzman? No. Mr. Stutzman? No. Mr. Moore of Utah? No. Mr. Moore of Utah? No. Mr. Estes? No. Mr. Estes? No. Mr. Burkeen? No. Mr. Burkeen? No. Mr. Obernolte? Mr. Obernolte? No. Mr. Carey? Mr. Carey? No. Mr. Edwards? Mr. Edwards? No. Mr. Clyde? Mr. Clyde? No. Ms. Houchin? Ms. Houchin? No. Mr. McDowell? Mr. McDowell? No. Mr. Gill? Mr. Gill? No. Mr. Moore of North Carolina? Mr. Moore of North Carolina? No. Mr. Boyle? Mr. Boyle? Aye. Mr. Doggett? Mr. Doggett? Aye. Mr. Scott? Mr. Scott? Aye. Mr. Peters? Mr. Peters? Aye. Mr. Panetta? Mr. Panetta? Aye. Ms. Watson-Coleman? Ms. Watson-Coleman? Aye. Ms. Plaskett? Ms. Plaskett? Aye. Ms. Escobar? Ms. Escobar? Aye. Ms. Omar? Ms. Omar? Aye. Ms. Ballant?
Aye.
Ms. Ballant? Aye. Ms. Capter? Ms. Capter? Aye. Ms. Jayapal? Ms. Jayapal? Aye. Ms. Chu? Ms. Chu? Aye. Mr. Tonko? Mr. Tonko? Aye. Mr. McGarvey? Mr. McGarvey? Aye. Mr. Amo? Mr. Amo? Aye. Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Are there any members who wish to change their vote or vote if they haven't voted? If not, the clerk shall report.
Mr. Chair, on the vote, there were 16 ayes and 21 noes.
The noes have it. The motion's not agreed to. That concludes the business of the committee today. I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Boyle, for working with me to make this meeting go as smoothly as it did, considering all things considered. I also want to thank the Congressional Budget Office, the Office of Legislative Counsel, for working with us and authorizing committees, all the authorizing committees in this process. The CBO provided extensive support in scoring and the instructed committee's legislative recommendation. The Office of Legislative Counsel similarly played a fundamental role in drafting the legislative text. I know a lot of long hours went into hitting our aggressive timeline, and we all appreciate their role in this process. Well, tonight, the House Budget Committee took a critical step to passing the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and making President Trump's America First vision a reality for the American people. So let's go forth and deliver on what we promised the American people.
Since you gave a brief close, I think
Well, that was kind of, I'd like to kind of end on that one. That's
Well, I respectfully disagree, and this will not be extended. You only spoke for a few sentences, so I'll keep it very short. Obviously, the members on this side have a completely different view based on at least what was in the bill as of Friday, and what I certainly think will be their CBO saying 13,700,000 Americans at least will lose their health care because of this bill for billionaires that was passed. We will continue to fight it on our side of the aisle.
Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.
More ambitious goals and standards for the nation, then California needs and deserves the ability to lead for itself, to protect Californians. And that's why these waivers have been so important. Because absent the federal government doing its part, and I'm not holding my breath for the next 3.5 years waiting for the Trump EPA to do so, then California needs the federal waivers to get the job done. But I know that even after all this progress, the detractors will fall back on the same tired playbook of excuses. We know that the big oil industry sees California's clean cars and clean truck sales as existential threats. California has made tremendous advancements, not just in technology, but in markets. But that's why the fossil fuel industry has launched an all-out assault on California's rules. And I'll give you just one example. If you happen to be reading the Wall Street Journal this past January, you might have picked up in an op-ed with the headline, quote, "Biden's EPA tries to put one over with EV mandate," end quote. That kind of sounds a little ominous. But if you read it, who the authors were. The authors went on to complain about how slow and laborious the process is for EPA to revoke a California waiver administratively. They literally tripped themselves up searching for every possible way to weaponize the Congressional Review Act to take down California's waivers. Now, who were those authors? The authors were partners at the law firm of Bowden Gray, who represent oil and gas clients and who were in court actively trying to repeal California's waivers. So it makes a whole lot of sense when you realize that they worked to publish this op-ed by June 8th, just 12 days before January 20th, when Donald Trump was sworn into his second term. And it's certainly no surprise that a month later, the EPA attempted to submit waivers as rules for congressional review, claiming that the Biden EPA had withheld them. Now, it's a little rich to accuse the Biden administration of withholding EPA waivers when the first Trump administration did the exact same thing. And so did every other EPA before it, both Republican and Democratic, in its entire 50-plus year history of the California waiver provision. In fact, when Donald Trump's EPA did what the Boyd and Gray lawyers told them to, submitting these waivers as rules to Congress, they actually still included language admitting that these were waivers and not rules. And when they were called on it, when it was pointed out, they had to go through the motions, do backflips, and resubmit the waivers to Congress. Ridiculous. Blatant. Now, regardless of how ludicrous this effort's been, we continue to hear all kinds of misinformation from detractors about why California's ambitious goals just won't work. I have a series of them, but I'll just focus on the main talking point that I've heard from my Republican colleagues and from industry, that California is somehow coercing other states into adopting California standards, or to let California do this is the equivalent of setting a national standard, or that these emission standards would become de facto national ones. That's ridiculous. We've made it clear, let California take care of Californians. If California had the power, the authority to set those national standards, trust me, we'd be doing this and a lot more. but we don't. But I think the good work that California has done that has benefited Californians, both our health and our economy, along with our environment, has inspired more than a dozen other states to follow California's lead voluntarily. Nobody's forcing other states, blue states or red states, to follow California's lead, but there's other states who see the benefits of what California is doing, and they choose to do so to protect their residents and to protect their environment. And lastly, let me just conclude by stating something that has conveniently been stifled in this whole debate, limited debate and conversation. So who benefits from all this? It's not unleashing job creation and innovation in states, in the other 49 states but California. It's holding our nation back in terms of improving air quality and our transition to a clean energy economy. The winner here is actually China, because like it or not, the clean energy boom globally is happening. And we have a big say in who leads it and who benefits from it. Is it the United States? Not by the leadership and the policies I've seen of this administration in the near future. It can be California, but it seems like you're more interested in taking our tools away. And so now we risk China jumping ahead both economically and technologically in this space. So I'll remind you folks, but because of California's leaning in on addressing the emissions, pollution, and climate challenges, California has become the 4th largest economy in the world. We have proven that what's good for clean air is good for business and the economy, and that is something that y'all to replicate and scale up, not fear and stifle. We have to be able to do both, protect our planet, strengthen our economy. California has shown us the way. We can have reliable cars. Our kids can breathe clean air. We can invest in our economy and in our future. California has been proud to fill the role of national leader in this space. We will continue to try to do anything and everything we can to do so, both for our interest and for the nation's. But what's happened these last 24 hours makes the job that much harder. Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from California.
Madam President, members, welcome to the Roaring Twenties. Not the ones you may have read about in F. Scott Fitzgerald novels, not the ones with jazz and liberation and industrial boom. I mean these Roaring Twenties, the ones where instead of flappers you get fossil fuel and dirty air, where instead of innovation you get obstruction, tariffs, isolationism, blinding nostalgia for a world that no longer exists. Instead of leaders who want to tackle the climate crisis head on, you get votes to tear down the tools that we need to fight it. The reason I stand here today and was here last night until 1:32 in the morning is that Senate Republicans have pushed through resolutions to revoke California's authority to set its own vehicle emissions standards, to set its own rules about what kind of air we breathe in California. This is an authority that my state has had by statute for more than 50 years. We've had the right to deal with our unique problems of congestion, our topography, our smog. We've had the right to demand of ourselves cleaner air for ourselves and for our children. And that is under attack right now, and not just California's ability to set its standards to protect its people, but because other states have also followed California's lead, this will affect the quality of air all around the country. And that is the gravamen of the problem for my colleagues in the GOP, and that is that it's not just California, It's the fact that so many other states have followed our lead. So many other states have decided they'd rather have fewer cancers than more cars with the combustion engines. That was their choice. That was their right. They weren't coerced into joining California. They made the decision about what was best for their constituents. And it is not for us in this body to arrogate to ourselves to decide we know better for Californians or we know better for people in other states than what their own leaders have decided about the quality of their air. This is a direct attack not only on my state, but on our ability to innovate, to lead, and indeed to breathe clean air. This is bad policy, clearly, certainly, yes, but it is also a dangerous abuse of the process in this House that will lead to other harmful consequences. To get this done, to repeal California's statutory waiver to set its own air pollution rules, Republican leadership have decided to blow a procedural hole in the filibuster. And let's call it what it is. This is a dangerous new kind of nuclear option that dispenses with the filibuster, but they would have us believe only here, only when it's necessary to cater to the oil industry. It is the oil exception to the filibuster rule. Now, the nuclear option has been used over nominees in the past, and there has been debate about doing away with the filibuster entirely. But today what we're talking about is only carving out the oil industry from the filibuster. So not carving out protection for voting rights, not carving out protection for reproductive freedom, not carving out fundamental rights for the American people, for which there would be a strong case to have a carve-out from the filibuster. But no, today we're talking about an oil industry-only carve-out. And they're using it to overturn some of the most successful clean air policies in American history. Since the 1960s, California has had the obligation and the ability and the authority to lead, and they've used it. We've used it to reduce pollution, to increase fuel efficiency, and drive innovation across the country. And much of the country has California to thank for the development of electric vehicles, for the improvement in fuel efficiency standards, because as we have led, others have followed, and industry has adapted. Despite the naysayers and those always saying it's too hard, it can't be done, America got cleaner cars thanks to California, and consumers got more choices thanks to California. Now, some in this chamber want to go back in time, not because the policy failed, but because it succeeded. Imagine if just after Henry Ford unveiled the Model T, Congress passed a resolution demanding we double down on bigger, stronger horses. Because that's what this is. A deliberate attempt to deny the future because it threatens the status of big oil. The president says that he is for energy independence. That's our mantra. Make America energy independent. But that is not what they're doing. They're killing clean energy all over the country. You know what just came out of the House in the dead of night last night in their reconciliation bill, their big ugly bill? A provision to essentially kill every clean energy project in the country that's not almost all finished. If it isn't going to be operational in a very short period of time, they want to pull the plug. Now, why would they do that? Why would they do that when, in fact, most of those projects are in red states, not blue ones, not states like California, but states like Indiana and Kentucky? Why would they do that? Because the obligation here is not to their state or constituents. The obligation here is to the oil industry. They would sacrifice the jobs in the clean energy industry all over the country to their own constituents. They would put those people out of work. And why because of fealty to the oil industry. This is not about energy independence. It is about oil dependence. Today, we are in a full transition to a clean transportation future, or we could be. And Senate Republicans are trying to bring back the smog. They're trying to make America smoggy again. We're seeing the climate crisis, and they're trying to cut the brake lines on progress. We're literally standing at the gates of the future, a future that we will lead or China will lead, a renewable energy future, and some would rather turn it all around and ride off in a horse and buggy. Because that's what this vote means. That's what these votes mean. Not just being stuck in a past technology, beholden to an old way of doing things, but also stuck in a dirtier and more toxic world. Millions will be stuck breathing in hazardous emissions unnecessarily. What is the pay for here? What is the pay for this gift to the oil industry? Cancer. Cancer is the pay for. We will pay for this repeal of clean air rules with cancer. Maybe your cancer, maybe your father's cancer, maybe your sister's cancer, maybe your child's cancer. That will be the pay for. Because this is about power, and it's about profit, and it's about punishing states that dare to lead. It's about undermining the Senate's own rules to score a short-term win that will do long-term damage, but will placate the oil industry. Because once you start twisting the CRA into a weapon to attack anything you don't like, rules, waivers, facts, you don't just hurt California, you hurt the country. Because don't think for a second it ends here. If this gambit works, it will not be the last time this tactic is used. Today, we blow a hole in the filibuster for the oil industry. Tomorrow, we blow another hole in the filibuster for what other polluting industry? Or, more broadly, should we expect this majority to use it to strip away protections for workers or privacy rights or reproductive freedom? This is the real fight here, not just over emissions or waivers or vehicles, but whether we are a nation led by and empowered to shape the future or held hostage by the past. The Roaring '20s were a time of reckless optimism. The stock market soared, inequality deepened, and political leaders told Americans not to worry, everything was under control. Until it wasn't. Because the same decade that gave us jazz and swing also gave us the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, a disastrous attempt to protect American industry by walling off our economy to the rest of the world. It sparked global retaliation, strangled trade, and helped turn a market crash into a full-blown depression. And what are we seeing now? New tariffs, retaliation threats, political attacks on states that lead, and now an attempt to tear down environmental progress and green innovation just as the global economy is demanding more of it, much more of it. The Roaring '20s gave us invention, yes, but also illusion. A false belief that we could grow forever without rules and without consequences. We are in danger of making the same mistake again. We should be building the EV infrastructure for the future, not dismantling climate progress. We should be investing in clean energy, not clinging to combustion engines. We should be protecting the rules of this chamber, not torching them when they become inconvenient to the oil industry. The gutting of these norms doesn't end in prosperity. The sacrifice of clean air doesn't end in making us healthy again. It ends in cancer. It ends in an enfeebled economy. It ends in a country going backward and shrinking in on itself. It ends in crisis. Let's not go there. I yield back.
The gentleman from Florida.
Madam President, I stand today to condemn the anti-Semitic and hate-fueled murders of Yaron Lachinsky and Sarah Milgram that occurred last night at the hands of a Hamas sympathizer. This was a sickening, violent, and anti-Semitic attack in our nation's capital. These two young professionals were targeted and murdered because they represented Israel and the Jewish people, with their murderer chanting, "Free Palestine," after killing them in cold blood. These were innocent, out for a night together at the Capitol Jewish Museum here in D.C., just like members of our own staff do each and every week. This anti-Semitism and hate for Israel and the Jewish people is disgusting, unacceptable, and must be condemned on every level. It's despicable and it's dangerous. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel hate since the October 7, 2023 attacks. We've seen Hamas sympathizers take over college campuses and instill fear into Jewish students. We've seen violent protests on our streets and now in our nation's capital. Jewish Americans are afraid to walk outside or live their daily lives. For nearly 600 days now, Israel has defended itself against Iran-backed Hamas terrorists who want to destroy Israel and destroy the Jewish people. These terrorists murder babies and women in cold blood, take and murder innocent people, and brag about their acts with no remorse. They took innocent people, including Americans, hostage and tortured them. They still hold the bodies of American hostages to deprive their families of closure. Israel is the United States' greatest democratic ally in the Middle East. We cannot abandon our ally. Thankfully, we have a president who is an ally of Israel and is working to fight anti-Semitism in the United States. President Trump is pushing back on colleges and universities that allow hateful anti-Semitic actions on campus that threaten the safety of Jewish students. He has appointed the most pro-Israel cabinet ever assembled. He is committed to defending Israel, combating terrorism, and protecting Jewish Americans. Today, I rise to condemn last night's heinous and anti-Semitic attack on these innocent people. I condemn this hateful rhetoric against Israel and against the Jewish people, who deserve the right to live freely and without fear in the United States and around the world. The United States must always stand with Israel and the Jewish people, and today we join together to remember the innocent lives taken in an act of hate and pay tribute to their lives and the contributions of the Jewish people to our nation. The fight against anti-Semitism is a bipartisan one. I'm grateful for my colleague Jackie Rosen for working with me to draft a resolution that draws attention to anti-Semitism in America and declaring May Jewish American Heritage Month. I yield to my colleague from Nevada, Senator Rosen.
Oops, there we go. I need the microphone. Madam. Well, I want to begin by thanking my colleague from Florida for his bipartisanship and his partnership in moving to pass this bipartisan resolution to recognize American Jewish Heritage Month by unanimous consent. I also want to take a moment to speak about the horrific murders that took place last night. Like so many other Jews in America and around the world, I woke up this morning heartbroken by the news of yet another unspeakable act of anti-Semitic violence that occurred late last night. This time in our nation's capital, less than 1 mile from where I'm standing this very moment. The shooting occurred outside of the Jewish Capitol Museum, where the American Jewish Committee was holding a large event, and the shooter went there specifically to target and kill Jews and people who he perceived to be Jewish. This anti-Semitism, plain and simple. There's no justification in the world for carrying out or condoning this violent and vile hate crime. It's pure anti-Semitic violence. My heart is shattered for the 2 Israeli embassy workers who were killed, Yaron and Sarah, taken from us far too soon. Both committed to public service, social action, peace, the betterment of the world. They were a young couple in love. I've read reports that Yaron was planning to propose to Sarah next week in Israel. They were cruelly taken from us far too soon at the beginning of their lives. May their memory be for a blessing, and may their killer be brought to swift justice. It's a tragedy that these innocent lives cut short by hate, and it continues to be a tragedy that these incidents continue to occur in the United States and all over the world. Over the last few years alone, we've seen anti-Semitic hate, extremist violence. They've done nothing but increase across this country. All over America, Jewish people, we've been threatened, beaten, verbally accosted, we've been killed just because of our faith, just because of who they are, because of who we are. We've seen horrendous anti-Semitic incidents and attacks on Jewish communities, at schools and on college campuses, on Jewish-owned places of business, and on synagogues and places of worship. And incidents of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and globally have risen dramatically since Hamas's brutal terrorist attack on October 7th. All of it is wrong. It has no place in our country, no place in our society, no place in the world. Those who commit these egregious acts, they want to send a message. They want to terrorize Jews, they want to scare Jews, they want to intimidate us, and it's vital that we all stand up together and send a clear and forceful message. And the message is this: we will not be afraid. We will not be afraid. We cannot be silent. There's desperate need to confront dangerous and growing anti-Semitism in our country, around the world, to show that bigoted efforts to intimidate us will not work. We cannot be afraid. We cannot be silent. And that's why I'm here on the Senate floor today, by passing this resolution and recognizing Jewish American Heritage Month. We are not just celebrating the numerous accomplishments and contributions that Jews have made to our country. We are sending the message back, a message that Jewish people have a place in America, that this is our home as well, that our lives, well, that they have value and they have meaning, just like anyone else, and that our country stands with it. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to allow this resolution to pass, and I want to thank Senator Scott of Florida for his partnership in the effort to counter anti-Semitism and hate everywhere. So, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to the consideration of S-Res 246 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
Senate Resolution 246, recognizing the significance of Jewish American Heritage Month and calling on elected officials and civil society leaders to counter anti-Semitism.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measure.
I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, thank you to all my colleagues for passing this important resolution unanimously today. I yield the floor.
Madam President,
Senator from Mississippi.
I know of no further business and suggest that we proceed to a vote.
Is there further debate on the joint resolution? If not, the clerk will read the title for the third time.
HJ Res 89, Joint Resolution providing congressional disapproval under Chapter 8 of Title 5 United States Code and so forth.
The question is on passage of the joint resolution. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Ms. Baldwin. Mr. Banks. Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Budd, Ms. Campwell, Mrs. Capito. Ms. Campbell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis,
Lummis, aye.
Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Mr. Mullen, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Reed, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Locken, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. Senators voting in the affirmative: Collins, Kramer, Cruz, Grassley, Husted, Hyde-Smith, Johnson, Kennedy, Lankford, Lee, Lummis, McConnell, McCormick, Mullen, Paul, Ricketts, Rounds, Schmidt, Scott of Florida, Scott of South Carolina, and Wicker. Senators voting in the negative: Mr. Hoven, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Alsobrooks, Baldwin, Cantwell, Coons, Cortez Masto, Fetterman, Gallego, Hassan, Hickenlooper, Hirono, Kane, Kelly, Kim, Klobuchar, Lujan, Markey, Merkley, Murray, Padilla, Rosen, Schatz, Schiff, Schumer, Smith, Van Hollen, Warner, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Peters, no. Mr. Sheehy, aye. Ms. Warren, no. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Curtis, aye. Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Mr. Daines, aye. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Marshall, aye. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Ms. Blunt-Rochester, no. Ms. Murkowski, aye.
would engage in. And I know they would be highly critical if the parties were reversed. In addition, once that waiver is struck down, it suggested under the rules of the CRA that a similar waiver might not be able to be granted in the future. So now you have two laws in conflict with each other. One law says you can grant the waiver. The other law says if something was struck down through the CRA, nothing similar can be done. How are we to resolve this? My colleagues have no answer. They've taken us down a path where words have no meaning and where sheer power by one of the richest enterprises in America, the fossil fuel industry, is all that matters. They are the puppet masters of my Republican colleagues. They have pulled the strings, and now we are in deep trouble to have an honest foundation for legislative action. This one waiver was something that the fossil fuel industry really hated because when cars became more efficient, they used less oil, and therefore the oil companies made more money. When these waivers were enacted, people were incentivized to buy cars that didn't even burn gasoline. And the oil companies were like, oh my goodness, we're not going to make as much money. Help us, dear Republicans. Help us out here. Invent something. Change the meaning of some words. Find some way to go past the normal legislative process to somehow deliver what we want. And my colleagues obliged. The damage is done. It's going to be extremely difficult to fix it. It's eviscerated half a century of California's clean air protections. It was the wrong thing to do to blow up the good work of a state seeking to solve its air pollution problem. It was absolutely the wrong thing to do to blow up the integrity of this body by deciding a waiver is a rule and undermining the ability of any group to act with confidence based on decisions made by the government of the United States. Because whether you have a waiver, or you have a permit, or you have a license, now you don't know whether some powerful interest is going to have this body rip it away from you. Let's work together to reestablish integrity in this chamber, integrity in our legislative process that was so badly damaged yesterday and last night. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
To recognize the senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Energy and Natural Resources be discharged from further consideration of S1051 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report.
S-1051, a bill to establish the historic Greenwood District Black Wall Street National Monument in the state of Oklahoma and for the purposes.
Is there an objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent
The
that the bill
committee
be...
is discharged.
Thank you.
And the Senate will proceed.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there an objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today to talk about two separate issues that seem to be confusing in our current climate at this point. The first of those is something called nationwide injunctions. Now, for folks that don't track this issue of nationwide injunctions, they have no idea what this means. I would tell you it is a fairly recent thing. We have three branches of government. Any civics student in middle school knows that. We have the legislative branch, we have the executive branch, and we have the judicial branch, and all three have unique roles. The legislative branch that we're in right now, we write the law. The executive branch executes the law. Judicial branch interprets the law. Now, we know there's a difference between the House and the Senate. The Senate has a responsibility, and the House has a responsibility, and they're different, but they're both in the legislative branch. Judicial branch also has different pieces as well, just like the legislative branch. There's a Supreme Court, we know that, it's right across the street. There's 9 justices that sit there, and they're the final decision maker on what the law says. But there's also daughter courts. There's circuit courts below the Supreme Court, and below the Supreme Court, there's district courts. District courts are scattered all over the country. And those individual small district courts that are scattered all around the country, those individual courts, they make a decision on the person that's in front of them. Now, again, this is fairly simple civics. When you have a federal case in front of you, you go to the district court and you file and you get time in front of a judge. Now, it may take time to be able to get there, but they make a decision on what is in front of them. That's what district courts do. They don't make decisions on something that's in a different state. The fine judges that are in Oklahoma make decisions about the case that's in front of them in Oklahoma. They don't decide a case in Indiana because they're not in Indiana. And it's not a case filed in front of them. It's only the case filed in front of them in Oklahoma. Now, if there's a dispute about that, it can be appealed, and it goes up to a circuit court, and it takes in a region, and if there's a dispute even there, they take it on to the Supreme Court. Pretty simple, until the last several decades. You see, prior to 1960, there was no such thing as a nationwide injunction. No one even considered that. But we started seeing this beginning point where a district judge in a court in a single state would hear a case and to say, this is so big, I'm not going to let this go to the circuit court or to the Supreme Court. I'm going to, in my lowest court in the federal structure, I'm going to decide for the entire country, not just the person in front of me. And there were just a few that happened at that time, and the Supreme Court kind of looked away because they seemed like big cases. But then it started to rise. During George W. Bush administration, there were 6 nationwide injunctions that were done in these local district courts. Under President Obama, there were 12 nationwide injunctions that were issued. Then under President Trump, the first term, there were 64 nationwide injunctions. As more and more individual district courts decided, I have an opinion, and I'm not going to decide about the case in front of me, I'm going to decide about the entire country. Under President Biden, there were 14 nationwide injunctions that happened. In fact, President Biden's Solicitor General, the one who actually argues to the Supreme Court, warned that nationwide injunctions halt the legal government actions and policies. See, this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. This is a constitutional thing. This is the United States constitutional structure to say what is the role of lower courts, what is the role of a circuit court, and what is the role of the Supreme Court. We as people in our nation, we honor the constitutional construct. And for me, it's exceptionally important that the courts are blind to these issues. and that they take action on the case in front of them and not a case that's not in front of them. Senator Grassley has introduced a bill to rein in the use of nationwide injunctions. His legislation is called the Judicial Relief Clarification Act. It makes it very simple. It is an important case, or is an important piece of legislation to decide how we're going to handle cases like this. It is very simple. Courts decide the cases in front of them. That has been the practice up until the early 1960s. We need to get it to be back to the practice again. Not a Republican issue, not a Democrat issue, a constitutional issue. Nationwide injunctions are a backdoor way for judges to actually write legislation and to bring the decision of the executive branch to a halt. The executive branch does have checks and balances, as does the legislative branch, as does the judicial branch. Those checks and balances are clear. If the executive branch does something inconsistent with the Constitution, it goes to our federal courts and quickly works its way up through the district court, circuit court, to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is the one who checks the executive branch, not each district court around the country. It is the Supreme Court. And we need to be able to get back to that process in the days ahead. That needs to be done. So I'm looking forward to seeing Senator Grassley's piece of legislation actually move. A second issue. This body for the last week has had a conversation about CRAs, and most of Americans would just flip the dial and go, I don't even know what that is. Well, the Congressional Review Act is a CRA. It's actually only existed in the last several decades as Congress found a reason to do oversight of the executive branch, especially when the executive branch writes what's called a midnight regulation. Now, that doesn't mean they wrote it at midnight. That means they wrote it and put it in place at the very end of a presidency. A Congressional Review Act says if there's a piece of regulation that's put in place, a rule that's done by an agency, and it's put in place, especially when there's a change in Congress and the White House, that the next Congress and the next White House can look at it and say, yeah, that's out of bounds. That's too big. That needs to be stopped. It was actually first used under President Bill Clinton. He put in what's called an ergonomics rule that literally changed the rules for every keyboard, every desk in America that would be produced. It was a giant rule they did at the very end. The next Congress came in and said that would cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And by the way, why should we in the federal government care what everyone's desk is like? Let people choose on that. And that simple statement, that simple first time that it was actually used, has started a process now of saying if an administration at the last minute puts in a rule that Congress then comes in and says you overreached your bounds, we can check it. Now, how do you determine whether it's a rule or not? What's a rule, what's not a rule? Because a lot of times agencies put out guidance or they put out orders, they put out all kinds of things. The Congressional Review Act is very specific. It says you can only take action on this when it is actually a rule. Well, there's two different ways that that's determined, actually. One is, how much is it going to cost the entire economy? If it's over $100 million that it's going to cost the economy, it's a rule. It's going to have a massive effect across the entire economy. The second way is pretty straightforward. The Government Accountability Office, you'll hear it often referred to as GAO, in 2018, they came out and wrote their legal decision and said it can either be a big thing that costs $100 million across the government, or I'm going to quote GAO in this in their decision that the CRA, the Congressional Review Act, gives agencies the primary responsibility for determining which agency actions meet the CRA's definition of rule. In other words, agencies get the first option to say, is this a rule or is this not a rule? If an agency says it's a rule, it's a rule. That's what GAO said. They came back a couple of years later and rewrote an updated document. GAO came out again and said in their legal opinion, when an agency submits a document to our office, that is GAO, to our office under the CRA, we consider that to be the agency's determination that the document is a rule under the Congressional Review Act. Now, again, everyone's glazing over on this because this just seems like legalese. Why are we even talking about this? Well, because it's been in the news this week. Because something unique happened. In 2022, the state of California put in a request to the Biden administration and said, we want to do a rule that's different in our state for electric vehicles than the rest of the country. Now, you may say, well, they can't do that. Well, actually, interestingly enough, California can. California is the only state in America because they had environmental rules even before the Clean Air Act was done. And so California got a waiver, basically, to say if your rules are at least as strong as the Clean Air Act, you can have your own rules, but you have to ask permission. So that's part of the law that was originally written on the Clean Air Act. So California approached the Biden administration in 2022 and said, we'd like to have an even stronger rule on emissions and on vehicles. We want to have a rule that says by 2026, 35% of all vehicles have to be zero emission, or that is electric vehicles, by 2026. Now, they asked for this in 2022. So they said within 4 years, we want 35% of all the vehicles sold in California to be zero emission. And by 2035, we want 100% of all vehicles to be electric vehicles, to be zero emission vehicles. Now, they asked for that in 2022, as I mentioned before. The Biden administration took a look at it, and in 2023, the Biden administration sat down with the GAO, Government Accountability Office, and they started working on the text for this. And the specific question was, how could we make sure that this is not a rule, this is an order? And for months, they worked to be able to shape the language, to be able to make sure it was an order, not a rule. And then the Biden administration sat on it and did nothing with it. In the meantime, 11 other states said, if California does that for electric vehicles, we're going to do that as well. Because here's the other thing about the law I didn't mention. The way the Clean Air Act gave permission to California to be able to do their own rules, the Clean Air Act is also written to say, if other states want to adopt the California rule, because it's at least as strong as the national, other states could do it. So in the next few months from 2022 and 2023, 11 other states adopt this rule. Suddenly, this is not a single state issue. This is a national issue. In fact, it would now affect 40% of all the vehicles sold in America. This just shifted. This is not about one state anymore. This is almost half the vehicles sold in America now are going to have a new set of rules. Biden administration sat on that request. They didn't move on it. Now, they'd gotten their opinion worked out with GAO in 2023, but they didn't move on it. Quite frankly, because the American people hate mandates. We don't like them at all. We like choice. We like to make our own decisions. I would dare say everybody in this room uses a different kind of ink pen because we all like our choices and options. We drive different cars. We wear different colors of ties and different shoes because we like our options. The Biden administration knew most American people would hate this rule because it suddenly created a nationwide mandate for what kind of car you could buy, and it had to be electric. So they sat on it. After the election was over, in late December of 2024 and into January of 2025, the Biden administration dropped their quote-unquote order and gave California permission now to be able to do zero-emission vehicles by 2026, next year. 35% of vehicles that have to be sold across 12 different states were going to have to be zero emission, which would dramatically change car sales in America. They did it after the election. That is the very definition of a midnight regulation. That is the very definition of a rule. It meets both criteria. It's well over $100 million of impact onto our nation, and it affects multiple states. So when the Trump administration came into office, the Environmental Protection Agency immediately re-upped this and they laid down and said, that's definitely a rule. That's a rule. The agency declared it. Now it's definitely hit both definitions. The agency declared it's a rule, and it's over $100 million of impact. But then a letter went to GAO. Remember I said in 2023 they had worked with the Biden administration? Someone in this body wrote a letter to GAO and said, hey, that thing you worked out with the Biden administration, do you still have that in a file? And GAO sent a letter back and said, well, we declared this in 2023 just an order because it only affected one state, just California. Here's the problem. GAO, as I mentioned at the beginning, in their very own legal opinion, said if an agency says it's a rule, and GAO doesn't even get involved. Literally, GAO broke its own legal opinion to now declare it's an order. Why would they do that? Well, they would do that to prevent this Congress from speaking to that rule. It would no longer be under the Congressional Review Act. I told you this was technical, but this was a fascinating little plot that went from 2022 all the way to the present to try to figure out how to get an electric vehicle mandate in America without ever having a vote in Congress. It was slick. It was well-shaped, except it was dependent on one thing: GAO breaking its own legal opinion. I happened to call the leadership of GAO just last week and said, as far as you know, has GAO ever declared something not a rule when the agency said it was a rule? And after a moment of silence, he responded, as far as I know, GAO has always deferred to the agencies until now. They literally broke their own policy. They literally violated their own legal counsel. So now we're in a quandary. GAO has broken their own legal counsel. We have an issue that will have well over $100 million worth of effect onto the country. It is now a near nationwide mandate on electric vehicle sales across the country without ever having a vote in Congress. And our Democratic colleague says, you can't change it because we worked a way to be able to fix it so you couldn't. That's not true. This body worked extensively with the Parliamentarian's Office. This body worked extensively across the aisle to be able to have conversation, talking with members of the Democratic caucus to say, do you really want to have in your state a mandate that's sitting there? We don't. Not only that, what will this do to our economy across the country? This was not about challenging the essence of the Senate. This was not about breaking the filibuster rule. This was not about going nuclear. This was about confronting an entity that broke its own rules intentionally to prevent this body from acting. This was the decision to make to say, can an agency impose on America a mandate that Congress never spoke to? Never. Or does Congress get to speak to this? I would say to you as a member of the United States Senate, the United States Congress is the lawmaking body for the country. The United States Constitution begins with all legislative power shall reside in a Congress, not in an agency that wants to have electric vehicle mandates for every American. That's not how it works. So we worked to make sure that we were clarifying one simple thing. In the Congressional Review Act, in this time, as it has been every time it's been done, and for every time in the future, this one simple question: when an agency says it's a rule, Is it a rule? It has been every other time until this time. We clarified that one question. It didn't change the dates of the Congressional Review Act. It didn't change the process. It answered one question that apparently was in dispute. That was never in dispute before, but now appeared to be in dispute. When an agency says it's a rule, is it a rule? And we clarified what it's always been. The answer is yes. It's a rule. And then we acted on that. And this body said, no, we will not have a nationwide mandate for electric vehicles across the country. By the way, I don't have any opposition to electric vehicles. If somebody wants to buy an electric vehicle, they should be able to buy that. I think a lot of them look like great vehicles. Buy it if you choose to. But we're Americans. This body should not mandate that everyone has to be able to buy one. This body should make the path that if people choose to buy one, they can. That's setting the rules of the road, saying, here's the definition of a safe vehicle. Pick any one of those safe vehicles you want to be able to have. But we just set the rules of the road and then get out of the way and let people decide which vehicle they want to drive on that road. That's what has happened this week. Now, I understand there's been a lot of bluster and a lot of trying to redefine what actually just occurred. But what has occurred this week is choice for the American people and clarification of what has always been. When an agency says it's a rule, it's a rule. Just like it was last year, just like it is now, just like it will be next year. Technical, but important, because the American people want to follow the United States Constitution and know that all legislative powers reside in this body, not in some other building somewhere down the street. With that, I yield the floor.
Okay, the committee will now come to order. Let me start out of courtesy for my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Thank you for your patience and for being flexible. And I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. I never want to cut your time short with your families because it's so precious and few, those moments. I know that as a dad of 3 young children. So anyway, I know it will happen, I'm sure, on both sides from time to time, but I want to just acknowledge that. And if there's any way in the future that we can avoid these things, I'll do it, Mr. Ranking Member. So any quick comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if don't mind, I do have just a couple parliamentary inquiries. Obviously, this is highly unusual. The fact that we recessed after a failed vote Friday morning, around lunchtime Friday, now we're back here late Sunday night. So presumably, we are voting again because some folks on your side of the aisle may have changed their mind due to some side agreements. So my parliamentary inquiry is, will the committee be able to see what side agreements have been reached? Will they be added as either a MTI or just here verbally, reflecting the ways in which now apparently the bill has changed?
The deliberations have continued up to this point where we judge this reconciliation bill or the many component parts as it relates to the budget targets that we've set, and that is what we're voting on. Deliberations continue at this very moment. They will continue on into the week, and I suspect right up until the time we put this big, beautiful bill on the floor of the House. So that's what we're here to do, and we're not going to disclose the deliberations. I'm not sure I could disclose all the deliberations.
Well, if I might, I certainly wouldn't.
I don't know anything about side deals or any deals. I just know we're at a place where we can take a vote today and not have to be back here for multiple votes.
Yeah, I would just, in the interest of transparency, if the bill has changed and there's been some side agreement reached, I think it's important that all the members have the full details on that in advance of any vote. So that way we know in a transparent, honest way exactly what we're voting on.
Yeah. You will get it in the manager's amendment like many of the, or like most of the members here. So I couldn't tell you what is in flux, what is fixed, what might change or not change. As you all well know, this process is fluid, and it will go to the Rules Committee. Most likely, there will be some changes, and that's the way the process goes. So I know you appreciate that. Having
Finally,
been through it before many times.
Well, I haven't had the opportunity to be chair, but I very much look forward to that year and a half from now. Finally, my other parliamentary inquiry, and a very serious point. As you know, we all operate under the 1974 Budget and Impoundment Control Act. It's what set up these committees, what set up Congressional Budget Office, requires a CBO score. We don't have, unless something has happened this weekend that I'm unaware of, we don't have that CBO score in front of us. Do you know when we will get the CBO score, both of the budget bill that we're voting in front of us and the scoring of any changes that it looks like are going to happen?
I will look into the timing of any outstanding CBO scores, and I'm certain that if there are outstanding scores, that those will be disclosed before our members vote, before our members collectively, both Democrats and Republicans.
Before you vote on the floor.
Yeah. But just let's appreciate how far we've come. And since you're asking me these, I think, relevant questions, we didn't even have, the last time we did reconciliation and the Democrats were in charge and had unified control of Congress, it never even went through regular order, didn't even come to this committee so that we could even have this dialogue.
Director Patel, welcome. Do not feel ill at ease for your tardiness. This is the United States Senate. We are not known for our timeliness.
Apologies, Chairman.
You are fine. We have called the hearing to order, and I'm going to make a brief opening statement and followed by the ranking member, and then we'll turn it over to you for your testimony. This is our first budget hearing for fiscal year 2026. Began the appropriations process. Delighted to have the chairwoman, Senator Collins of the full committee, with us today. She and Senator Murray, I know, are fully committed to us getting our work done, but that is a challenge in and of itself. I welcome Senator Van Hollen. He's a longtime member of this subcommittee. He is the new ranking member of this subcommittee, and I suppose I should say, I won't say that I miss Senator Shaheen, but I enjoyed working with Senator Shaheen. I can't say that because that would be offensive to Senator Van Hollen. So I look forward to working with both of you in this committee as we continue our work in CJS. This hearing will consider the President's budget request for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Our witness today is FBI Director Kash Patel. Director Patel was confirmed as the 9th Director of the FBI earlier this year. He begins his leadership as the FBI continues to combat grave threats to our national security and public safety. I look forward to learning about his priorities for the Bureau over the coming year. I'm especially interested in learning how the Bureau will execute these priorities in the context of the President's budget request. That request is transmitted to Congress last Friday. The skinny budget proposes a reduction of $545 million from the fiscal year 25 levels, enacted levels. This is approximately a 5% reduction. I am concerned by the scale of the cut, especially as I know full well it comes on the heels of 2 years where the FBI's budget was essentially held flat, forcing it to absorb hundreds of millions of dollars in unavoidable inflationary increases. I also know so much of the FBI's budget is utilized in paying personnel. Any efficiencies and savings may have already been achieved because of that circumstance, and there is a challenge in finding other ways to cut additional dollars. Director Patel, I'm concerned that the scale of the proposed reduction could force the FBI to eliminate vacant positions and leave positions unfilled as current special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff as professional staff depart and retire. The challenge of this is the challenge of this committee. Americans and the FBI confront numerous obstacles, numerous things that have to be accomplished. Addressing the fentanyl epidemic and restricting the Mexican cartels that produce and traffic it, intercepting potential terrorists who plot to harm Americans like the attack in New Orleans on New Year's Day, locating and investigating foreign nationals who try to enter our country to steal intellectual property or gather data on national security sites, and preempting Iranian plots against former or current U.S. officials and Iranian dissidents. That's just a few of the tasks which make up the Bureau's mission. Fewer FBI special agents, intelligence analysts, and professional staff could hinder the Bureau in executing the President's commitment to making our communities safe. Our law enforcement, whether state, local, or federal, keep our nation safe and help carry out justice. I want to make certain these men and women are equipped to counter crime, but reducing the federal law enforcement in my home state, in Kansas, means less support for local police officers and local sheriffs. Also means less support for the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. I'm also eager to hear about the Director's goals to reform and improve the Bureau, including the initiative to redeploy positions currently concentrated at FBI headquarters and the D.C. region to field offices, to more fully field offices across the country. That seems to have appealed to me. Director Patel, thank you for your testimony that we're going to hear. I look forward to working closely with you throughout the appropriations process to provide the right level of federal resources to support the mission of the FBI. Senator Van Hollen, again, welcome as the Vice Chair of this subcommittee, and you're recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Moran, and I look forward to working with you on this subcommittee. I want to thank the Chair of the full committee, Senator Collins, for her leadership, and also recognize Senator Shaheen and thank her for her guidance as we go through this budget, having previously served as the chair here. And it's good to be hearing from our first witness. Director Patel, welcome. Look, this is supposed to be a hearing on the FBI's fiscal year 2006 budget request. We're in a difficult spot because we really don't have much of a budget request. What I'm holding up, 46 pages, is the entire budget request of the Trump administration for the entire government. And you can see we've got a short paragraph here on the FBI. That's all we've got. Compared to the fiscal year 2025 budget, which was submitted. So I would say to my colleagues that we're having a hearing on the fiscal year 26 budget request without an actual request, except for one paragraph, which, as the chairman noted, proposes a $545 million cut to the FBI salaries and expenses account. It doesn't tell us what missions the FBI proposes to reduce or to eliminate. It doesn't give us any sense of what it means for the safety and security of the American people. We're left to guess at that. I would say normally we also get for the FBI alone this information, the congressional budget justification, and we don't have any of this year. We have one paragraph, Mr. Director. And as the chairman noted, the FBI has experienced significant cuts. In fiscal year 24, under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, the CJS bill overall was cut by $2.5 billion. It resulted in a cut of 1,025 positions at the FBI. This was before your time, Mr. Director. And under the fiscal year 25 continuing resolution, deep cuts continue, and I understand that the FBI will be cutting another 875 personnel just this year because of the fiscal year 25 request. Mr. Director, you testified yesterday that the President's fiscal year 26 proposal, which is this paragraph before us, would result in a cut of another 1,300 positions. My view is that those will likely do a lot of harm to the FBI's overall mission. I do want to briefly touch on another issue of great importance to the mission of the FBI and the men and women who serve there, and that's the need for a modern, secure campus that meets their security needs and the mission. This is an effort that goes way back, well over a decade. Look no further than the 2011 and 2017 GAO reports on this issue, and if it was an urgent priority then, a new headquarters could not be more urgent now. The FBI is in desperate need of a new headquarters. The current building is literally crumbling with nets in place to catch falling concrete and debris. Mr. Director, I'm glad from your testimony yesterday that you have taken notice of this, and you stated in that testimony that the Hoover building, quote, is simply unsafe for the FBI personnel. I completely agree. We also know from GAO reports that the Hoover building does not meet the security needs of the FBI, and that significantly more security requires a setback campus, not one located in the middle of downtown Washington, D.C. That's why, after a years-long transparent and open process, the GSA selected a site for the new headquarters in Greenbelt, Maryland. That decision was final, and it was made clear that it was the best site that met the needs of the FBI. So, Mr. Director, I hope that in the coming weeks we can discuss the importance of that new headquarters. I also look forward to hearing how the FBI will be implementing its proposal to relocate up to 904 vacant positions from the National Capital Region to unfilled slots in the field. I appreciate the fact that the Baltimore field office would get 40 of those positions. Baltimore has seen a drop in violent crime, but we always need to do more. And in closing, I just want to thank the 35,000 FBI employees for their tireless dedication and service to our country. We continue to ask them to do more with less, all while their invaluable work keeps us all safe from harm. And so we must ensure that they have the resources that they need to complete their mission. Dr. Patel, Director Patel, I look forward to your testimony.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you very much. And we now recognize the Director of the FBI, Kash Patel.
Thank you so much, members of the committee. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, and all the committee, subcommittee members. It's truly an honor and a privilege to sit here as the 9th Director of the FBI. It is something that was quite unimaginable to me growing up as a child. And as I sit here, I'm humbled by listening to you and your colleagues yesterday, and both looking forward to our conversation today. President Trump has set new priorities and a focus on federal law enforcement. I'm here today in full support of the President's budget, which reprioritizes and enhances our mission of law enforcement and national security. We're fighting for a fully funded FBI because we want a fully effective FBI. We want an FBI in support of the President's budget that puts law enforcement, fighting violent crime, and national security first, and that does only those things and nothing else. We have, in my approximately less than 3 months there, I have sensed a renewed vigor within the men and women in the FBI, both at the 1811 status, IAs, SOSs, and across the country and around the world. A few quick highlights since I became the 9th Director. We've taken 3 of the FBI's most top 10 wanted fugitives in the world, 3, and apprehended them from around the world, to include terrorists, gangbangers, and those who wish to do more harm to our children than any other criminal on earth. We've joined with our interagency partners around the country in many of your home states to detain and arrest violent fugitives and criminals who are pouring fentanyl into our country, committing gang violence, and robbing our banking systems with high levels of fraud. We have also partnered with folks down in states like Florida to seize just a few weeks ago 20 metric tons, that's 44,000 pounds of illicit drugs, mostly cocaine. We kept $500 million worth of narcotics off the street in that one seizure alone. We've also reprioritized, or it's a priority of mine, to go after those with the full force of the FBI that harm our children. Just yesterday, we announced the summary successes of what we call Operation Restore Justice. In the last month, we targeted any individual in this country who is harming our children through extortion rings, through sex trafficking, or through other violent criminal activities. In the last month, we've arrested over 400 individuals committing violent crimes against our children. As I stated yesterday with the Attorney General, if you harm our children, you will receive no sanctuary. Just this last week, we arrested over 200 violent criminals effectuating acts of violence against our children, and we will not stop. Operation Restore Freedom has just started. We need to double down on other criminal threats as well, to include national security. Our foreign adversaries, foreign spies, are infiltrating our networks and our cyber technology capabilities. We need to bolster those capabilities and bolster the toolkit that the men and women have to augment and protect this nation. Foreign and foreign and domestic terrorists plotting against innocent Americans must always remain a high threat priority, and we are vigilantly watching that, and we will not diminish our capabilities on that front. The operational tempo that the agents and analysts and SOSs and support staff at the FBI put in every day is truly awe-inspiring. We have forensic examiners, we have linguists, we have computer scientists, we have people translating languages from around the world 24/7 just so we can digest and get to you, the elected members of the United States Senate, the information you need to help us achieve our mission. One of the shining examples of our mission is our Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is situated in all 55 field offices across this country. Having worked in our Joint Terrorism Task Force on a lot of the terrorism cases I handle, it is one of the most effective ways to combat our nation's biggest threat. Another example, modeled after the Joint Terrorism Task Force, that I have focused on is countering narcotics, because I believe it is the bedrock of what allows these narco traffickers to commit such heinous acts of violence in America. Our Counter Coordination Fusion Cell out in Arizona, also known as the Southern Border Intelligence Center, has been fully staffed for this mission set alone. And it doesn't just cover the Southwest. It's there because of its geography, but it covers the entire mission. Under my leadership, we have put internal processes under the microscope, and we have streamlined operations. We've also looked at duplicative contracts and found that there are FBI contracts that pay multiple folks to do the exact same thing. So we're trying to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse on our own. I'll speak to the redeployment of assets during the question and answer period here today, but I just want to make sure and leave you with this. Building the infrastructure and the future of the FBI is just as important as building the manpower of the FBI and keeping it going. And I want to work with you as I navigate through my first appropriations process, and will highlight to you that I am not the expert on it, but I need your assistance and we need your support at the FBI. The men and women there deserve it, but more importantly, the men and women of America need it. Thank you.
Director, thank you. Thank you for your presence here today, and I'll call now upon the Chairman of the Full Committee, Senator Collins, for her questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to salute you and the ranking member, Senator Van Hollen, for your leadership, and also recognize Senator Shaheen for her many years of service and leadership on this committee. Director Patel, when you and I met in my office prior to your confirmation, I described to you a terrible problem that we have throughout rural Maine, and that is the proliferation of illegal marijuana operations connected to transnational Chinese criminal organizations. These grow houses are destroying homes. They're threatening our communities, our public health, and our national security. When I asked your predecessor, Director Ray, about this issue at last year's hearing, he confirmed the connection between these illegal marijuana grow operations and Chinese criminal organizations. Now, Maine's county, particularly our sheriffs, local and state law enforcement are working hard to shut down these grow houses, but they need more help from the federal government to help identify connections to money laundering, human and drug trafficking, and other criminal activity. Has the FBI developed a strategy and dedicated resources toward combating these illegal marijuana grows that are tied to transnational criminal organizations in China? And I would point out that the state of Oklahoma is also disproportionately affected, but these grow operations exist in more than 20 states.
Senator Collins, I remember our conversation vividly and took it to heart, and I appreciated your, I highlight our conversation as one of those examples of allowing me to be educated on what is effectuating citizens across this country. And I use it as an example of we can't quarterback that operation from Washington, D.C. alone. So what we've done since I've taken the seat as the director of the FBI is reprioritize assets to push out into the field to cover down in not just pieces of Maine, but all of Maine. And when we finish this redeployment cycle, hopefully within the next 6 to 9 months, we will not only just have the manpower in the field, but at headquarters, I've prioritized intelligence collection against the CCP that is directly tied to these marijuana grow houses. We have numerous new investigations open on just these matters alone, but the field is telling me what you're telling me. We need more folks out there. I'm trying to put them out there as fast as I can, but I also can't cripple the needs in Washington, D.C., so we're doing it in a timeline fashion of 30, 60, 90-day pushes as best as we can.
Thank you. I hope that we can come up with a strategy that involves DEA, the FBI, our sheriffs, everybody involved. There's still more than 200 of these suspected houses that are the illegal growing operations. Second question that I want to ask you has to do with a questionnaire that was sent out to FBI employees prior to your confirmation by the acting leadership at the Department of Justice. The intent was to scrutinize the operations of the FBI's employees, but it also had a chilling effect because agents were asked to identify investigations and cases that they've been involved with including if they had been involved in investigations of individuals who were involved in the violence that occurred at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Once the Attorney General was confirmed, I wrote to her and urged her to ensure that all such evaluations be done very carefully and not result in unfair adverse actions against FBI personnel who, after all, do not pick, for the most part, the cases. They're assigned cases, and they've dedicated their careers to public safety. Have you taken any further action to scrutinize the FBI personnel for their involvement in certain investigations? And has the questionnaire that was sent to field employees led to any subsequent adverse personnel actions?
Thank you, Senator. I think you're referring to two separate questionnaires, let's call them. One relates to January 6th and one relates to providing an update to your supervisors as to what you're doing or on a weekly basis. Addressing the first one related to January 6th, no one has been adversely impacted nor will be at the FBI under that mandate because the same guidelines will always be adhered to. You will not be removed from your employment at the FBI unless you violate the law or your ethical guidelines. On the January 6th matter specifically, Senator, it's currently in litigation with the Department of Justice, so I'm limited in what else I can say about that because it is with the court, the federal court. On the email, I believe you're referencing since I came in, about the work to the workforce, directing them to highlight, I think it was up to 5 things they were doing. When that came in, I was the FBI director, and I immediately put a halt to that. I also worked with our Department of Justice and our White House and said, due to operational needs, we cannot